So this is part 3. This will be breaking down the lambs. My setup's pretty simple. It's just a table that's slightly elevated so you're not bent over. Some containers to put your cut products in. A couple of sharp knives, way to keep them sharp. And a meat saw. I do use the pallet wrap too, just kind of for things that I'm going to deal with later, just to get them wrapped up and keep them clean. I'll also be using my bandsaw a little bit later in the process. You don't have to have one of those. This thing will work fine. It's just a little bit slower. So anyway, we're going to get one out and get going on it. So here's our first half. We're going to break this first one down and I'll kind of walk you through it. And then there's some steps we'll do a little bit later, but we'll at least get it into some pieces. So the first thing we're going to do is work on the leg, and this chunk here is your whole leg. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bottom part off, which will become my shank portion of that, which is more for like stewing, and then we'll have our leg of lamb roast. So first thing I usually do is take the tendon off. You're not going to need that. Come in with your saw, just basically somewhere at above where the meat starts. That piece will come right off. And then we're going to move up, and you just look basically for where the knee joint would be. And we're going to come down and go right to the top of it. Get our saw back out. And that should be through. Just a little knife work there. And that would be your lower shank portion. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to move on to this. I'll switch the camera here a little bit so you can see it better, and we'll get going on that. Just going to show this from the top angle because it'll be a little easier to understand. So when you're cutting through your hind leg portion, what you want to do is come in right where this bone starts to taper down. We're going to cut right through here. We'll do it with our knife first, and then the saw. And that'll leave you basically your leg of lamb roast, which you can break down further. I'll probably do one of those just so you can see what it looks like. But right there's your cut point. It's right where it starts to taper. Okay, so start with our knife. Just get some of the muscle out of there. That way the saw doesn't tear it up as much when you're coming through. And then you can finish it off with your knife. Through the bottom, but you're better doing it slow so you don't end up. There we go. Tearing up your meat. So that you could do whole. You want to get these bone fragments off, or you can separate these muscles out, and I'll probably show you that on one of these. But we're gonna move on to the loin section next. Okay, so I kind of lied. We're not actually doing the loin next. We're gonna get this front arm off first. All right. Pretty much any animal, all you have is a shoulder blade holding this in. So you can come in underneath, kind of into the armpit, and by just applying a little bit of pressure, see my elbow's not going there, that whole shoulder blade will peel back. And you can just take the whole thing off, right up to the joint. Okay, so that front leg is off. We'll do the same thing on the front part here. This will be our other shank. And most of the front shoulder, you can do lots of different things with it. I'll probably end up grinding most of it, but you can do stew or chunks out of that portion. But so now we are officially moving on to the loin part. I'll get this adjusted one more time and move on to that. Okay, so this loin section's a little bit hard to do by yourself, so I'm going to fight it here a little bit, but hang with me. Essentially, what I'm doing is I'm going to take my knife and score mark for the length that I want my lamb chops. If you don't really want the bones on them, obviously you could do a clear up high, but since there's not much meat on these anyway, they'll get stripped out for grind, and I'll have nice long bone chops. So I want mine to come in somewhere about there. Once you get down to the bottom part here, it's just meat. So the hardest part about doing this with the saw is keeping this thing from sliding all over the place. If you had somebody else hang onto it while you cut, it goes a lot easier. But just, if you go kind of slow, the ribs actually cut fairly easily. You keep them in one spot. Go here and trim that up. Okay. And one pass through with your knife will get that outside layer. You can use these actually as just straight up spare ribs, and I'll trim off this lower part for grind, and they're actually kind of nice that way. So that would be the bottom half of that. What you have here now is basically your full loin that you'll have your chops in. So what I'm going to do is going to come in and up here on the neck, and I'll remove it right at the neck, which this all is going to be into my grind stuff, and I'll have my full loin. And with this full loin, what I'll do is I'll end up freezing it so I can run it on the big bandsaw and cut nice pretty chops on it. So we'll move on to kind of trimming up the front leg, and we'll just be just about done. Okay, so what I've done is I've come in here, and there's a bunch of fat right around the neck. You want to trim as much of that out. It's not really any good use for it. And then my next cut to remove my neck portion will come in right here past my first rib bone. And once again, this is not a great cut because you're going through several bones there, but you're going to want to do the same thing. Make yourself at least the meat portion with a knife. Come back in with our meat saw. And cut through the other side. So I'll trim all this out, and like I said, this will just go into my grind pile. But this loin, after it has some time to stiffen up in the cooler, will get moved on to the meat saw. So I'll show that in a little bit, but my next step is I'm going to break this leg down a little bit to show you a couple other options on that as well. So on this leg portion, I could probably do a 10-minute video just on different options on this, so I'm going to give kind of a Cliff Notes version of a couple places if you want to take some of the muscles out. But it's just fine like that, like I said, as a roast. But the way the muscles work in here is there's a kind of curved bone here. This whole inside muscle will come out. You know, yellow jacket, perfect. And then this top muscle over here will come down and come out as one muscle too. And then you'll have a little bit of trim up here, which would be the actual sirloin. It's a little tiny guy on a lamb, but this piece can come off separate too. So I'm gonna break that down, and I'll show you the three pieces. Otherwise, you know, it'd probably take me 10 minutes to do that, but I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. Okay, so I'll show you a few cuts along the way. Just doesn't do too much good to show you 3 chunks of meat in the bone. But so this first seam come in, and you can actually see the top of the kneecap there, and we're going to pull this through on the back side of the bone. And there's another seam that runs right down through here, and that will be your chunk that's coming off. Okay, a couple more cuts down the road, and what we've done is opened up this whole side, and then on the back side we separated the bone underneath. And we can come back and trim these up. We don't want to waste any of that. This next bone is fairly challenging to get out just because of its shape. So usually I'll take this off in separate muscles, but I'm going to go ahead and just debone this whole, and that way you can see the seams better in the actual meat on there. So get the rest of this bone out and show you what we got. Okay, so we got our bone out. So obviously need to be cleaned up. All that will go into the grind, but you can see how it's kind of that L-shaped, which is a little challenging to get that leg out. But here are your 3 muscles. This is your top sirloin, and then this would be your inside and outside round if lambs have those. But you can break these down into individual roasts. You kind of see a little better at the seams here. Or you could do this whole as a boneless leg of lamb if you want to roast it whole. But for this one, that's as much processing as it's going to get until we get to cutting up the meat on on the chops, which we'll be doing on the saw. So that'll be coming up here in a sec. Okay, so here's it all broken down. There's a little bit of waste over there, which is some fat trim, or loin, which will get wrapped up here and headed to the freezer so we can get that cut. I'll show that in a little bit. Spare ribs, front 2 shanks. So the 3 bones we pulled out. You could use those for stock, or I'll probably use them on my trap line. And the top sirloin right here, and the boneless leg, and a little bit of trim for grind or stew or whatever you want to do with it. So move on to the parts that need to get packaged and get this guy in the freezer, and I'll show you how I cut it. So while we're waiting for those loins to kind of firm up, we're going to grind up all the trim. And it usually takes a couple hours to get the loins at least firm enough to run on the saw. You can even let them go overnight. It doesn't really matter if they're totally frozen, but they do definitely cut better when they're firm. So we'll run the rest of this through and kind of get cleaned up and wrap everything that we've got, and then I'll show you the cutting the loins next. So we got the rest of everything processed. Moving on to the meat saw. The loins have been actually overnight, so they're totally frozen. And I went to get the saw out and had to clean the 3 mice nests out of the top box and the bottom, which is enough to make the guy pretty mad. But anyway, we'll get this thing fired up and get some chops cut. Okay, got the saw rolling. As you can see, they just make nice even chops. And you actually, this has a guard so you can set it for thickness, but since they're frozen saw, it's pretty easy to just kind of make them whatever thickness you want. So I'm going to buzz the rest of these up and give you a look when they're all done. So this is how I'll end up cutting most of these loins. I got 4 of them to do a bunch of the kind of end chops, and then I'll do a center rack. And like I said, I've got 3 more of these to do. Normally at the end of these videos I try to do kind of a summary of costs and kind of what it takes to be able to do a project like this. This one's kind of scattered because I traded chickens for the lambs, and I got them at almost butcher size anyway, but the rough math on it worked out to be a little over $100 a piece, and the hanging weights on them combined was 74 pounds. So anyway, like I said, it's not too difficult of a critter to raise, but I'm sure going to enjoy this one. So, as always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.